right. So the idea today is listening up and lightening up. Listen up and lighten up. And I kind of been saying that for a couple of years, listen up and lighten up, because I do this call in the morning for Miracles Live 365, and I usually post the links and I say, listen up and lighten up. And I think that's kind of clever for whatever reason. But, you know, the idea is what we think about, we bring about. We've heard this a million times. If you're from Unity, you know, if you're from New Thought, if you're from Course in Miracles, if you're from 12-Step, you know. What you think about, you bring about. We know this. This is not really a new thought anymore. But what we don't always consider is that what we listen to is what informs what we think about. You know, and we're either listening to one or two channels. We're either listening to the channel for love or the channel for fear. We can break it down that simple. And then everything else unfolds from that. So we could say that listening is a very valuable and powerful spiritual practice. Can you hear me now? You know, to pay attention to each other, to really give each other our ears. It's a very generous, it's a spiritual practice to listen. You know, at SpeakEasy we say that we speak easily about all religions because we are consciously listening to each other. It's not just like we're screaming in a room together, Jewish, Catholic, you know, Buddhism, Baha'i. That would be nonsense. The reason this really works is because we're listening. That's the real magic. We had a friend in California, not to drop names, but Gary Marshall, and he, you know, was a director, and he said that 3 things that would make it really impeccable, because I used to go around to directors and ask them, what's the most important thing? And he said, you know, 3 things. Listen to the person's story, number 1. Number 2, listen to the person's whole story. And then number 3, listen to the other person's whole story first. How about it, right? Most of the time we start to listen to the story and we're like, okay, got it, moving on. Right? We do it all the time. We don't wait to the end of the story. We don't give each other enough time. Why aren't we listening? You know, why do we want to just, know what we know and go on with the show, the same old regurgitation of the same old thing? We don't want to allow anything new in. To listen means to learn something new. So how can we be generous listeners? You know, we learn from listening, not from talking. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should be listening twice as much as we're speaking. Now, I cannot claim to do that. So we're all on course together with this thing. You know, I'm sure I could edit myself. My husband once said to me, my husband's on the camera, he said, Maureen, you speak more words than I can hear. Truer thing was never spoken. So how can we become a generous listener? One way is to come undivided to the conversation, to really come undivided. And how can we hear if we're not fully present for each other? Coming divided to a conversation is like trying to listen to 2 different radio stations at the same time. You end up in the middle of the station and all you're getting, middle of the dial, and all you're getting is static and distortion. And that's what we're passing on as listening these days. It's our multitasking that's preventing us from really practicing the spiritual tool of listening, being fully present. So listening, we could say, is best done from a place of stillness. And that requires us to close down the computer, to put down the phone, to give that person our eyeballs, right? And then to lean in as if they're the favorite show you've wanted to watch, right? Like they're your guilty pleasure. They're The Bachelor. Say maybe for you. That would be for me. I'm not kidding. I don't watch The Bachelor. I got sucked in by my daughter one time. But yeah, imagine if you watched your beloved like you watched your favorite program and really leaned in and got that excited to just hear. Imagine if you listened to your beloved in your life as if you were going to hear God speak your name. Are you listening? Can you hear me now? So, we know that listening is a vital medicine, right? We've heard it from all of our ancestors. They've told us there's 4 original medicines. You know, when you get unplugged and you go to that medicine woman, she'll say, when did you stop singing? Oh, when did you stop dancing? Oh, when did you stop enjoying your stories? And when did you stop feeling comfortable in your own silence so you could actually hear? If we practice these medicines, look, they're free and available. You could do them anytime. Kids know how to do it. You go to a kindergarten, you go to a preschool like Dawn runs, and they do this. They have story time, they have dancing time, they have sleep time, they have naps. You know, they've mastered it. Jesus says, be like little children. That's what he's talking about. So the idea is to practice this listening in the empty room. Practice to what the cat's saying to you. Practice to what the barista who feels tired, who can't even make eye contact with you, is screaming at you. Practice listening to that. Practice listening to the stillness between the words. And to be able to say to each other, have I heard you correctly? Let me check in with you. You know, have I really taken you in, and taken you in the way that I would once take in a sip of wine, to really contemplate the complexity of it? Have I truly contemplated the complexity of you? I doubt it. You're very complex. Mary O'Malley. So really to contemplate the complexity of this moment, if we're still right now, there's so many beautiful blessings to be available to us right now. And that would have provided us with a holiness. So am I seeing your perception, you know? A Course in Miracles says, above all else, I want to see. And why is that? Because if I truly was seeing right here, I would have no business in the past or in the future. It would allow me to be present in this most holy moment. Or am I listening to my objective? Am I listening like I'm playing a game of chess? I just want to win this one. I just want to get to the end of this. I just want to fix this situation. I really don't want to hear you. I just want to clean this up and get you out of my sight. And it's embarrassing, but sometimes we listen like that. Or am I listening as if another train is arriving and I got no time for this one? You know, that was a big thing in showbiz. You know, you always felt like you were like vying for the eyeballs, and all the time they're looking over to see who else is coming in the room. You gotta, you know, really earn your moment there. So these are just contemplative questions for you. Listening plays a very big part in the fulfillment of our role. When we think about Lesson 154 from A Course in Miracles, where it says, I am among the ministers of God. Okay? So that's true for me today. That's true for you today. And it doesn't mean that we got to go out and get a ministerial license. You know, it doesn't mean that it's going to make you do anything differently than what you're already doing. And when you say minister of God, maybe there's even people in this room that are saying, I don't want to be a minister for God. That's a little bit too much for me. So we could change it around. A minister for love. What would love have me do? But what does it mean to be a minister? To be a minister means to attend to someone else's needs. And I might say that to attend to someone else's needs might be the most holy proposition that we could ever fulfill. You know, as much as it seems like, no, I got to get my own, when we allow ourselves to attend to someone else's needs, it's miraculous. You know, that's where the good stuff happens. We learn this all the time in 12-step. When we show up for someone else, we get the promises. We get the good stuff. So is it arrogant or humble to accept this title that you are among the ministers of God? What if that were true for you today? How would you move about the world? We think that a minister is somebody who gets up and speaks on Sunday morning and has a special handshake with God. That's not true. It's nothing further than the truth. You are each in your own right ministers, providing a service to the world, whether that be through art or storytelling or, you know, lawyering or whatever it is. That's your ministry. It's what you're doing right now. We want to get confused about it, but there's no confusion. It's happening. You know, this is it. Love has already infused you with your own superpower, your own strength, and that love also knows where those superpowers can best be applied. The divine source has already birthed you and baptized you and breathed you into knowing that these are necessary in the world. You fulfill a purpose, and it even knows who you should share those with and when. All you have to do is listen. Isn't that amazing that our part is so small? All we have to do is listen. But we sure do go running down the block with our hair on fire trying to think, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? You know? It's like, settle down, my love. Listen. It's right here. It's right now. Love requires very little from you. It doesn't need for you to profess or promote or polish up your goods. It does not need that. You are already all that you need to be. You might not have heard this, and that's why it's important that you hear it with both your ears, that you are already, and you already have everything that you need. I remember when I heard that the first time, a friend of mine told me, you already have everything you need, and I was like, what? Mind blow. I was like, if that were true, how would I live? If I knew that I already had everything that I was seeking, so the way that you know that you have shown up, the only thing that you required of you from God is your little willingness. Your little willingness. And how do you know that you've shown up with your little willingness? Is if you're listening. That's it. If you're listening to that still small voice within you. And God's just saying all the time, can you hear me now? Now, the ego speaks first and loudest. That's what A Course in Miracles says. It keeps us distracted. The ego has this immaculate and amazing way. And the ego, if anything, is consistent. The ego is consistent. It will wear us down. It will distract us. It will use everything it can in its toolbox to get you off course with your greatest yet to be. A Course in Miracles says that it speaks first and loudest. And so we have to go underneath that first voice that we hear and say, let me get to the truth. But that requires, once again, that we settle down, that we get still, that we practice being still. The line that we repeat over and over is, be still and know God. Now, it doesn't say know God. It says, don't skip the steps. Be still. That's the thing we don't want to do. We're like, I know God. I know God. You could get to know God in a better way if you got even stiller. So, the idea about the stillness, of getting to the stillness of God, is because the conversation in God is impeccable and it's in love. And there is no fear there, and there's no excuses there, and there's no disease there. And the thing is that, we want to sing a song to God that's broken and bewildered and busted. And the sad thing is, God's not on that station. God does not, I want to say God does not hear those prayers, which I could get in a lot of trouble for. But what I will say is, God does not believe those prayers. She has no stock in your brokenness. You could come all day and night and say, I'm broken, I'm bewildered, and God will say, I love you, and everything is going to be okay. And our actual response to that, to be in harmony with God, is, I love you too, and everything's going to be okay. That's the actual song that God is seeking to sing with you, but instead we've picked up some other sideways script where we're saying, this is broken, this is busted, you don't understand, I don't know how to do it, I'm confused. And God just says, that's because you're not at the end of the story yet. We're not singing that part, we're singing, I love you and everything's going to be okay. Can you hear me now? Can you respond to that? I love you, everything's going to be okay. Yeah, sure, that sounds kind of audacious. But if you're going to have a God, you might as well have an audacious God, right? If your God is not audacious, why have one? Yeah? I thought that was funny. We waste so much time telling God about our fears, and God has no stock in the legitimacy of our fears. He has no stock in the legitimacy of our fears. You are never going to convince God of your fears. It's not going to happen. Optimally, God would just like you to sing that harmony, that we spoke about. And that comes from a book that I read called The Song of Prayer, which is an addition to A Course in Miracles. If we sing in harmony, and if we get in tune with God, that's true prayer. That's the song of prayer. And if we seek to reach God, we get to go in the song of prayer in gratitude. God, you're so good, and I'm in love with you, and all is well. I'm going to put away my mad rambles about what's not working. I'm not going to drag my crucifixions to your holy altar. I'm going to leave that at the door. It has no place in heaven, and I am not invested in that today. I'm invested in speaking the good news, because only then can I truly be of purpose for you. I don't need to drag in my sideways self, come late and, unprepared to your altar. I'm going to get up early. so that I can be with you. This is for me, but if I'm speaking it to your ears, it must be for you too. So you got to put away your rambles. Does it seem this crazy to be this in love with God? Does it seem that mad to be this in love with God? Not when you think about the benefits, man. Seek first God and all else is given. We've got that ass backwards. We're seeking everything else but God. Seek first God and all else is given. You want to make a mad dash to your divine in whatever way that you can. And you know how to do it. You're pre-programmed for it. So, can you hear me now? There's a one voice that has been appointed and has anointed you in your function, okay? It whispers to you all day long. Can you hear me now? It gives you the strength to hear and to understand. Can you hear me now? It's able to do all that it needs to do through you. Can you hear me now? And it ensures that you will have perfect success in everything that you do related to your function in love's plan. Can you hear me now?
No.
Yeah, right? You want to get fired up in that. That's the truth and the whole truth. We've been dragging our lazy asses around town trying to figure out a way to go. And God's like, over here, just listen up. I got it for you. I got every answer you will ever need. I got every solution to every problem. The only thing you haven't tried yet is going deep with me. Are you ready? So, the answer is yes. God doesn't give us, but so in that scenario, it does require that we move to the end of the high dive board, and we jump. And I got to tell you, there's nothing more scary to me than walking to the end of the high board. I have had times in my youth where I got to the end of the high dive and I actually turned around and went back down the ladder. I cannot even tell you a more humiliating moment of my life. Oh, you don't want to do that. So it does require that you jump. And the reason that we get confused and go, I don't know, God, can I trust you? Are you going to be there? I don't know. This seems like a big step. The reason that it feels confusing is because God doesn't tell us the whole story. And this, my friends, is a very generous thing that God does for us. Because if we were told the whole story, if we were told how magnificent God's plans are for you and how big they are and how you're going to go to the moon and back with God, you would never even take the first step on the ladder. That's how well God knows you. You'd be like, oh my God, there's no God. You would look at those plans and you'd say, God has got to be crazy if he thinks I can do this. So I can no longer pay attention to a crazy God. I'm going to put that on the back burner and I'm just going to try and do it my best because there's no way I can do that. So God is like, okay, I'm just going to give you the first step. I'm just going to give you the next right step. That's all that's required of you. And if you take the next right step, we will go to the moon and back. But we'll do it one step and one breath at a time. And when I say big, audacious plans going to the moon and back, I'm not talking about ego. I'm talking about those big, audacious plans that are most impactful and most helpful for your community. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having big, audacious plans of, of fame and fortune, but if it's most helpful to the plan that you're here to play. But, among the ministers of God, it's talking about living among the ministers of God. If my ego wants me to be, famous, you know what that means. I got to live on the top of the hill. And you guys all have to stay down here. But when I live in the ministers of God, we all go together. Wouldn't that be nicer, anyhow? To live on the circle of happiness where we all benefit. It's a new paradigm that we're moving into, and that is why we sit in a circle here and not just the guy at the top and you're all just looking at me and all you see is the back of someone else's head. That's not helpful. Anyhow, you are a minister of God's love, a minister of God's love. What else could you ask for? If you understood that you are on the God squad, you must understand the immeasurable joy that comes from fulfilling your role. In listening to this voice, you will be washed over with the awareness of the laws that come with being on point with God. And these are not the laws of the world. They're not scarcity. They're not separation. They're not sin. You could say no sin. Yeah, no sin. It's an illusion. It's a horrible nightmare that we made up here on earth to prevent us from being intimate with God. And God says, when God sees us dabbling in the illusion of guilt and sin, God says, gosh, how did I get such bad PR? I'm the good guy. I have no investment in you feeling shamed or bad. Like, never, 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 never. Think about when Pam brought up in the meditation that person you love more than anything else in the world. If your God isn't as big as that, get a bigger God. Can you hear me now? So we will find this concept easier if we accept that to get there, it takes being still, to listen up. Listening up will allow us to lighten up. And all questions are answered in that stillness. And not only do I believe this, but I have lived it. And I am aware that this actually works. I'm not going to serve you some soup that I haven't digested. This is the truth and the whole truth through my experience. But I cannot make you digest it. You have to try it out scientifically for yourself. So you have to use this as a scientific experiment, if you will. What would happen if I really went deep with God? And once you hear the message of love that you're asked to deliver, you know, your own special ministry, the important thing for you to remember is to remember you didn't write the message, okay? You're just supposed to deliver it. You didn't author the book, the song, the building, the baby. It's not actually yours. You're just delivering it out into the world. And you don't have to fear or fight the message. Just deliver it. That's your part. Through you, though you don't want to take ownership of it, you do want to take care of it. But like I said, what I like to say is no fame, no blame. You don't have to take blame for what shows up out of your mouth, and you don't actually have to take fame for it, you know? You could just say, you know, goodness comes through the hand of God, through the voice of God. God does through me what I can't always do for myself. And again, it doesn't mean that you don't have to, you're not going to be famous. It just means that if that's the most helpful thing, just deliver the message. Because here's the thing, you can't give what you don't have. You know, so if you've received it, extending it is just the natural progression. So first receive it for yourself by listening. When we ask love, what would you have me do? Listen, and then just do the next right step. And we say, you know, we want to say, oh, that's hard. You know, I don't know how to do that, or it's harder for me. We hear that a lot. No, you don't understand, it's harder for me. It doesn't really work. I don't really hear anything. Well, then just keep at it. It's a muscle. You got to work it. It does work if you work it. So the reason we think that it's hard sometimes is we think that we're going to be asked to do something that we don't know how to do. But when you're doing God's plan, there's nothing that you don't know how to do. There is actually, even I might say, no doing in it. You just have to get out of the way and let the plan unfold through you. It's only, again, your little willingness. There's a piece in A Course in Miracles from 154 that I wanted to read to you before we close up and get into conversation with you. And this is what it says. It says, there's one major difference in the role of heaven's messengers which set them off from those the world has appointed. The message that they deliver are intended first for them. Isn't that great? I always say that my mouth is saying what my ears need to hear. And that's the truth. The message that they deliver are intended first for them, and it is only as they can accept them for themselves that they become able to bring them forth and to give them everywhere that they're meant to be. Like earthly messengers, they did not write the message that they bear, but they become their first receiver in the truest sense, receiving to prepare themselves to give. You got it? So once you got it, the most natural thing to maintain it is to give it. To have all, give all, to all. That's from A Course in Miracles. So I'm going to give you one last tool about how to keep that channel open, okay? So if we want to hear the voice of God, we got to be impeccable, not just about what we're saying, like the Four Agreements say, don't assume anything, be impeccable with your words, but we also have to be impeccable with our listening. What are you listening to, you know? Do you got those channels on that are junk food for your brain? Are you reading stuff that's not really beneficial to your highest vibration? Are you in conversations that support gossip and judgment and negativity and complaining and excuses and exaggerations and lies and vitriol and dogma? And that's like the 8 deadly sins right there. And if so, can you see if you can either excuse yourself or turn the channel? if you're in that conversation, you must be there for a reason. Perhaps it's for you to turn the channel and raise the conversation to a higher degree of possibility. People might not want to hear it at first. They might call you crazy, but that's okay. It's better to be crazy than lazy, I always say. Actually, I've never said that before. First time I'm hearing that. Better to be crazy than lazy. I don't even know if that's true. Anyhow. Anywho. One practice that came under my nose this week came from the Jewish culture, and it's called Shabbat. And the Jewish culture has this beautiful thing called Shabbat, which I'm going to start practicing for myself. When we say we honor all paths to God, it requires that we don't just honor them, but we actually walk in our brother's shoes a little bit. How else are we going to know what it's like, right? So Shabbat is when you take some time on Friday evening to Saturday evening, and you kind of turn within, away from the worldly attentions, and you turn into your sacred center and the nature of who you're here to be. There's many ways you can Google and look up what Shabbat means, but essentially it's like they even prepare the food before this time, so they don't have to do anything. They light candles, they drink and bless wine, they break bread together, they play board games. They have this beautiful time of being unplugged. Doesn't that sound like a breath of fresh air? This is one way that we can cultivate stillness. I'm not going to tell you not just what not to do. I want to give you some tools of what you could do. You know, even if you began a Shabbat for 1 hour on Friday, that would be a worthy endeavor to really turn away from your worldly identities and turn into having an intimate conversation with your divine. So my friend Bonnie Powell has inspired me, and one of our resident Jewish women, who is going to be helping us to thread that theology through our conversations in a more intentional way, which I am super excited about because I have so much to learn. So we're going to have our first Shabbat this Friday. Please hold us in prayer in regards to that. That's the word. Thanks for watching. If you want more tips and tools on how to be a spiritual vixen, go on over to my website, MaureenMuldoon.com, and you can sign up for my love notes. Until then, I'm Maureen Muldoon, the spiritual vixen, reminding you to love more, fear less, and don't forget to laugh.